Welcome back, Shadow viewers. It's time for another installment. Gotta love it when it's in the middle of the night. Right now, for me, it is past midnight. Oh, so beautiful, the wind is blowing outside. My cats are chirping and meowing. And yes, my cats do chirp. Those of you that have cats know what I'm talking about. They're so cute. You gotta love them. But I digress. How did you like Chapter 1 of Cry for Me? The exposure to the world. Getting to meet the twins. Learning about the history that led to the world they live in now. Well, without further ado, let's dive in to Cry for Me, Chapter 2, The Division of Reality, A Realm Tale by Keys Troy. Enjoy. Hope you're comfortable. Crack that window. Have a drink. And light that candle. Perhaps the flame will be a different color. All right. Are you two settled in? Daniel asked. Kolya and Ashley nodded vigorously, as they were both anxious to hear more. They had eaten their dinners faster than everyone else, and, in their excitement, had even helped to clear the table and put the leftovers away without even being asked or prompted to. They even cleaned and dried and then prepared plates for the Domovoi and the Domovika, the guardian spirits of the house, and presented the plates to them and offered their thanks for their kindness and protection before they met their grandfather in the living room. Daniel picked up his coffee from earlier, took a sip, and frowned at its chilly temperature. He grumbled under his breath about the age of his cup as he fiddled with the cracked dial on the side. After a second, the cup made a whirring sound as it refilled with fresh hot coffee. He took another sip, this one much more satisfactory, and he placed the cup, which was in fact almost as old as he was, on the table next to his chair. "Where were we?" Daniel asked as he pulled his pipe from his pocket, stuffed it, and lit it again. "You were about to tell us about what happened after the weapon was used," Ashley said as she was watching her brother, reaching up and playing with the purplish magenta smoke gently dissipating in the air above them. Daniel smiled at them and took another puff on his pipe before continuing, this time Ashley joining in with the playing with the smoke. "It came to be called the Banshee's Scream," Daniel said. Both children stopped and sat back down on the couch. Everyone of their age had heard about the banshees and their screams, and thus the very mention of the word banshee caused all to become fearful and alert. Like so many new things different about this world from the old world, banshees were a fact of life. If you heard one scream, you ran home, and if you weren't near home, then you ran to the nearest home and prayed that the residents showed respect to their guardian house spirits. In an instant, the entire world fell silent. It was as if sound stopped existing. Soldiers stopped fighting. Bombs made no noise when they exploded. Lightning flashed without any thunder to follow. People's screams couldn't be heard. Children's cries had no presence in the arms of panicked parents. Orders from warlords came as heavy breaths on deaf ears. Words exchanged between lovers were left unheard. For several minutes the world was hushed. Then the sun disappeared from the sky. It just dimmed away. Subdued madness wrought by the tyrannical world was brought to the surface of humanity as the world was plunged into a consuming, silent darkness. Then distant sounds came. Like the first wind on a breezeless day, it started as a faraway echo that was gradually getting closer, moving faster and faster as it approached. This wind, as it were, brought with it every sound that had been absent during this time. None of these sounds had any discernible origin, since everyone's own voice sounded like it came from far away. It came from everywhere and stunned the entire world where it stood. It was like someone had muted the world and then was slowly turning the volume up. Then the auroras came, forming dimly at first and then growing brighter. For the first time in known history, the entire sky over the planet was filled with rushing, brilliant colors. It said that everyone stopped in that moment and stood in voluntary silence and stared with wonder up at the skies. Everyone was afraid of what was happening, but was also so comforted by these auroras. Under these auroras, the world found a moment of peace for the first time in generations. If any made a noise, it was only frightened children and soft whispers. Soldiers on the front lines, who had only moments prior been trying to kill each other, stood side by side with weapons lowered and watched the skies above. The air felt charged with electricity, and it was getting stronger. Every surface vibrated gently, and everyone's hair stood on end. The auroras began to look more like liquid, much as they do now. Suddenly the whole planet rumbled. Then a loud boom cut through the peace and silence. It was as if a massive bomb exploded inside the planet. It crumpled buildings and brought everyone tumbling to the ground. Fear returned to the world. Then another boom, and another, and another. The force of each boom slapped the ground from underneath with such force that it lifted people and objects off the ground. No one knows just how many booms there were. But it only lasted a few moments before it happened. The Banshee's scream. The Banshee's scream ripped through everything like a razor sword as the world was plunged into a state of chaos not seen in millennia. Some believe it was the earth itself screaming in pain. Some believe it was the universe. The ground began cracking and opened up, bright green light emanating up from the gaps as the earth ripped apart. The light from the ground stretched up into the skies like lasers, and even the skies cracked open. Pulses of plasma electricity shot forth in powerful shock waves from the cracks in the sky and the ground. People began disappearing in the pulses. They'd fade more and more with each shock wave until they were no longer there at all. What's more, people not known would appear as if by a reverse process of the whole thing. Whole cities and others faded and appeared. Massive tracts of land vanished and new ones would appear. Oceans shrank and grew, and land masses moved. The entire earth was changed. The cracks in the earth and the sky began closing. The banshee's scream faded. The auroras calmed and dimmed. Everything was wet as if it had just rained. As the skies cleared, a new universe loomed above us. It was almost completely different from the skies of the old world. New stars and constellations, the universal rim of galaxies that arcs across our sky, hadn't been there before all of this had happened. The old world had only stars and a faint glow of our own galaxy, much of which was easily drowned out by city lights. It was also said that countless other Earths could be seen above, only momentarily. They faded away back to their layers of our reality. But we know they were there, that they existed. Most of the planet we were given was lush and alive with plants and some new animals. The Earth was now a new planet unlike what it had ever been. The division of reality was over. The old world was now only a memory. Old Earth was out of reach. And we were left with a new Earth, our Earth. In some cases, ancient things were given new life. Take, for instance, the old castle, which, like almost everything on the planet, had moved locations during this whole catastrophe. It was not only restored, however, but it was now 4 times larger than it had been before. This is why it became such an integral part of our world as it is today. Now, even though our world had been given new people, there were more that disappeared than we had gotten. Over 2/3 of the Earth's population had vanished. It's believed that only those of us that looked like we do now were the ones that remained. We only had gotten a few thousand new people, but with them came the ancient spirits and creatures of folklore and the knowledge of them. Together, our ancestors helped to shape and grow this new world. It wasn't easy, but they did it. Grandpa? Kolya interrupted. Yes, Daniel said. What happened to Aneralan? Kolya asked. Yes, and what about the demon and the child? Ashley added. Well, Daniel began. You said that the weapon was supposed to get rid of Aneralan, Ashley said. I'm getting to that. You two don't miss a thing, do you? Daniel said, smiling at them. He took another drink of the coffee and another puff on his pipe. The weapon had, sadly, been a success when it came to ridding the world of Aneralan. While Aneralan, the continent, had survived the division of reality, the cities and peoples, all of them, were gone. What we know now is that 3 different Earths from different layers of reality were combined. It wasn't an even combination either. Just like with the 3 ruling powers of the last war, one of the Earths was absorbed by the other 2. We know that while our world became lush and beautiful, the other remaining Earth, what we now call Old Earth, became a dying wasteland of ash and devastation. We know that Earth, as a planet, was trying to heal, but the peoples that now inhabited that land continued the last war. We don't know for how long, if it ended, or what. The last person to come from that world told us this. We're not even sure how exactly she was brought back. Only that she was.
Grandpa?
Ashley asked. Yes, dear, what is it? Daniel said.
Was she the child that lived with the demon? She asked.
No. The child had grown up during the beginnings of the last war. And she and the demon both went to Old Earth. Don't forget, children, that she was born half demon herself, Daniel explained. No, the woman who came back was, well, she didn't have a name when she came, but her twin brother who had... Daniel, it's time to leave. Liara begrudgingly interrupted. The last transport for the night is about to arrive. Oh, that's a shame, Daniel said, his joints aching as he stood. Kolya and Ashley protested again the interruption of the story. Daniel said nothing as he grabbed his coffee cup and walked towards the living room door. He drank the last of his coffee and turned his cup off before putting it into the pocket of his coat, which was hanging on a hook next to the living room door.
Can't you tell us the rest of the story now? Or at least part of it? Kolya pleaded. Yeah, tell us something, Grandpa, Ashley said with a yawn.
No, children. The transports don't like being late, Daniel said as he put on his coat.
We'll come back soon, and you can hear more of it then,
Liara said. She already had her coat and hat on and was waiting for Daniel to join her by the door.
When will you come back? The children both asked.
Well, if I remember correctly, there's someone turning 24 next month, Daniel said, staring down at the kids.
We'll be 13,
Kolya said, smirking at his grandfather's bad joke.
He knows,
Liara said as she gave the children a goodbye hug. 13 is a very lucky number, Daniel said as he, too, gave them a hug.
Come on, kids. Let's see Grandma and Grandpa to the yard so we can wave goodbye as they leave,
Ashley and Kolya's mother said. Their father held the door and everyone walked outside, off the porch, and down the path that led to a circular metal platform in the corner of the yard. The yard was bordered by a wrought iron fence, the tips of each post glowing and flickering softly like a candle. Bushes colored with dark blue stems that grew out into deep red leaves lined the fence. Specks of blue light moved slowly on the inside of the stems, and the very edges of the leaves had the faintest red glow. Each flower in the flower beds glowed dimly in the colors they naturally grew in, everything from the rainbow. And the grass had a soft teal glow that came from the roots, barely illuminating each blade. Just as they reached halfway down the path, a pixie flew up from out of nowhere and stopped just in front of Daniel's nose. The glowing humanoid creature that was no more than 2 inches tall held its hand on Daniel's nose and made some squeaking noises at him. I didn't forget you, Daniel said, purposely speaking softly, so as to assure a friendly tone. You can never tell if a pixie is paying attention to you. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a glass orb, just a little smaller than a marble, and held it up in his palm. The pixie flitted down and inspected the orb. After just a second, the pixie sat down on his fingers, uttered a small curt squeak, and mimed a dramatic death, complete with arm to forehead. Don't be like that. I know you're alive. You're still glowing, Daniel said. He stuck out a finger and ever so gently poked at the glowing figure. It gave a giggle-like squeak and kicked at his finger and waved its arm at him. Daniel chuckled at it. Hey, you know I wouldn't give you something boring. There's a surprise to it, Daniel said. The pixie sat up and tilted its tiny head as it stared up at him. Tap it, he explained. The pixie stood up and walked around the orb a couple of times before crouching down and finally tapping on the orb. It instantly began to glow a soft blue. This apparently pleased the pixie, as it squealed excitedly. It snatched up the orb and hugged it. It will match the color of any plant you put it next to, and when you want to make it glow again, just tap on it, Daniel said. The pixie flew up, still holding the orb, and kissed Daniel's nose. It flew around as he laughed with delight until it came to a rest on his shoulders, where it plopped down and stared up at him, smiling. Now, what have I told you? Daniel said as he reached up to the pixie. It reluctantly stood back up and walked onto his finger. He moved his hand so that the pixie was in front of his face again. It just stood there with its head lowered. You wouldn't like my home. Too warm for pixies to be happy, Daniel said, to which the pixie replied with a pitiful, almost inaudible sigh. Besides, I need you, my precious little friend, to keep a watchful eye on my grandchildren. The pixie suddenly perked up and gave an exaggerated nod. It squeaked at Daniel and took off from his finger. It flew over to Kolya and pushed on his shoulder. Pixies, being surprisingly strong, was able to shove Kolya towards his sister. Both the kids and Daniel laughed as the pixie flitted above and over to where their shoulders met and began marching back and forth, sounding out each measured squeak with each step. Thank you, my friend, Daniel said. The pixie stopped and gave another exaggerated nod and took off toward the flowers, holding the orb to each flower and squealing with glee each time the orb changed color to match the flower it was next to. Daniel and the kids went to join their parents and Liara, who was waiting on the platform. Daniel gave the children another goodbye hug before joining Liara. Everyone said their well wishes as a soft vibrating hum came from above. A ship was approaching. The only way it was visible was because of its completely mirrored hull. Its shape resembled that of a combination of an old blimp and the classic space rockets of old science fiction. Only the very tips of the rudders glowed with white light. It came to a stop above the metal platform, and a beam of light appeared around Daniel and Liara. The platform lifted up a few feet into the air as a man's voice, sounding as if he were standing right next to them, spoke. Last stop, Metrobus flight number 3311 to Lawsor City, Mars. Leaving now. Is everybody ready? The man's voice said. Ready, Liara said. I'm ready, Daniel said. Both her and Daniel waved as they lifted off the platform and into the air. They entered through a portal that opened up on the underside of the ship. Once inside, the portal disappeared and the ship turned and aimed up at the sky. The white lights grew brighter as the ship increased in speed quickly, and in seconds had vanished into the night sky. Kolya and Ashley stared up at the galaxies that filled a third of the night sky up with wonder and fascination. Hey, Kolya, Ashley said. Yes, sis, he replied. Can you imagine a world without the galaxies? She asked. I don't know. No, it would be scary, Kolya said. Yeah, it would, Ashley said. Doesn't feel right. No, it doesn't, Kolya said. Hey, Ash. Yeah, bro, Ashley said. Do you think it'll happen again? Kolya asked. The division, I mean. Ashley looked at her brother in the eye and saw the same sense of fear at the idea of another division that she felt. I really hope not, she said. The parents ushered them both inside. and to their room. Ashley and Kolya were both tired, as it were, and put up no contest against going to sleep. Their parents said good night and left the room, closing the door behind them. Ashley suddenly got up from her bed and ran to the tall table on the far side of the room. "Mom forgot to light the lamp again," she whispered as Kolya sat up. Ashley pulled a lighter, just like Daniel's, from the drawer under the table and poured it over a copper bowl placed in the center of the table. As its contents lit on fire, a soft green glow lit the room. It began shifting in color slowly as silver spindles rose up from the sides of the copper bowl. The spindles took on different shapes that moved about, casting shadows of fairy creatures and spaceships on the ceiling and walls. Ashley put the lighter away and returned to her bed. "Good night, Cole," Ashley said. "Good dreams, Ash," Kolya said. Both were asleep in seconds and dreaming about the stories they had just heard, and the stories they were going to hear soon.